Let me tell you about the show's newest sponsor, Juniper Mountain Coffee. You can check them out at junipermountaintradingpost.com and check out everything that they sell. I really like what they say on their website. And guys, if you are a coffee connoisseur like me, this here American company that's not run by a bunch of wokesters might be worth checking out for you. What they say is, we roast coffee for those loyal to a lost way of life, those that never back down in the face of adversity, the ones that keep their word, treat people with respect, and still believe in the importance of hard work. We offer some of the best coffee in the world and look forward to earning a spot in your cup. And they have definitely earned a spot in my cup. Whether you like light roast, dark roast, ground already, or not ground, you just want to order it fresh. And they even have those little pod things for those of you that just make one cup at a time. I drink too much coffee for that, so I don't do that. And they also have a cold brew. But it's a great company, great story. You guys are going to dig these guys. Check them out at junipermountaintradingpost.com. Let them know the Western Huntsman sent you. This is that time of year when it's really time to turn up the heat on your scouting. We're going through summer. Season's going to be here before you know it. And I don't care if you're going after mule deer, whitetail, the mighty wapiti, whatever it is. Scouting is imperative, and it makes it much easier when you use trail cameras where they are allowed. And let me tell you something. I like trail cameras that are easy to use, functional, and have good quality pictures. That brings us to Spypoint. Spypoint trail cameras. You can check them out at spypoint.com. And it doesn't matter if you're looking to do one of the cell cams, like the Flex X or the Flex G36 or the LM2. They have some great deals on their website. Like right now, if you check them out, they've got some clearance cameras going on the cell cams. You can also get a cell link that attaches to any regular cell camera and will transmit pictures right to your phone. The other trail cameras, if you're way out in the backcountry and don't have phone service out there, the Force Pro S and the Force Pro are my go-to cameras. I absolutely love them. If you guys saw the pictures from this last bear season, they were really high-quality pictures, and they were all done with that Force Pro camera. So check it out, guys, at spypoint.com, and let them know the Western Huntsman sent ya. There exists a threat, from anti-hunting groups to politicians trying to give our land away, and we won't stand for it. Those vast western landscapes provide the space for our wildlife to thrive and a place for hunters and anglers to fuel the fire that sparks their soul. In this show, we share our love of hunting, fishing, and conservation. Here, we provide the foundation to meet these threats through passion and the grit of the American outdoorsman. Welcome to the Western Huntsman Podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Western Huntsman Podcast. This is Jim Huntsman, your host, coming at you from the Broken Town studio, and I've got Mr. James Nash on this week. Super cool. I'm excited for a couple of reasons. I've been following James on social media for a long time, and I'm a big fan. I love the Six Ranch podcast, and I am. This is like the first time I'm recording with Zoom in a long time, and I can actually see his face. So, sorry about the face you have to look at, James. But welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be here.
Like I said, I'm pretty excited. You can see in my background, we're in my makeshift studio. I've been recording in a camping trailer for 2 years now. And when we moved out to the new property here, I've got this designated room that's going to be the studio, but the whole house is under a remodel. So all I did was throw my banner up behind me on this really funky wall. So
I think it looks great. You know, I'm in my studio right now too. And it's pretty eclectic. I've got all kinds of skulls and stuff, but the newest addition is I made a big batch of deer salami, some hard salami, and with a traditional salami, it's not over when it's smoked. It's not like a summer sausage. So I took it through the entire process of stuffing it and smoked it until it got up to 156 degrees. And now I've got all these salamis hanging from the center rafter of my studio. So it smells like smoky meat in here. And they'll hang until they lose 25% of what they weigh when they come off the smoker. And then at that point, they'll be more or less shelf stable, but they'll definitely be ready to slice really thin and enjoy.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, that's one of the things I like following you for is the production side of the wild game meat. I'm a little leery of one. You had just posted a video where you took a hindquarter of a whitetail, and what did you put? Like salt, garlic, and something else, and you said you hang that sucker all winter long.
Yeah, I hang it until it gets warm in the springtime. And it's great. Refrigerators are actually fairly new. I don't know if people realize that or not, but refrigerators are relatively new. Electricity is relatively new.
Yep.
So for a long time, we've had to store food and we've had to preserve it. And there's only a handful of methods that are effective at doing that. And we sort of live in a time where people are pretty scared of their food these days. We cook stuff to death. Everything gets boiled. You can't, go anywhere without seeing a hand soap that brags that it kills 99.999% of everything in the world. We throw a lot of chemical at just about everything, and we're pretty fearful. I was thinking yesterday about some time that I spent in Tanzania, and one of the really interesting things when I first got there, I flew into Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. That's on the coast, on the Indian Ocean, and they're giving us a little tour of town because we weren't flying out into the bush until the next day. And part of this tour was to stop at the fish market, and the fish market was all these concrete slabs that were right on this bay, and it was at low tide, so it already smelled bad. It's the Indian Ocean, and all these fish, they just like flopped out on top of the concrete in this hot African equatorial sun.
Whoa.
And you could smell that thing from a couple miles away. Now, to me at the time, I was like, how is this possible? Like, this is revolting to walk around. It was just hitting me in the face, that smell everywhere I went. And the more I've thought about that over the years, the more I've realized that if people were getting sick from eating that, then they wouldn't continue to do business in that way. Right.
Yeah.
So humans are a lot more capable of eating stuff that isn't pristinely preserved than what we give ourselves credit for. So yeah, you can definitely get sick from eating meat that has developed botulism or listeria or some of these other things. But in general, we're quite a bit tougher than what you think. And I've eaten some pretty stanky stuff. And the only foods I've ever gotten sick from have come from restaurants.
Yeah, I was going to say that I have too. I've eaten some super questionable items in the past, and the food poisoning that I've gotten, I think I've gotten it twice in my life, have both been from a modern restaurant in the States.
Yep.
So anyways, yeah. So that's it. I want to come back to this.
Okay.
But for the people that don't know you, let's do like a quick bird's eye view of who you are and what the Six Ranch Outfitters is, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay. So my name's James Nash. I grew up here on the Six Ranch. The Six Ranch is my family's ranch. It's come down through my mom's side. We are one of the oldest businesses in the state of Oregon. The ranch was founded in 1884 and has been in the family the entire time. And we've lived here and raised cattle on this place for 6 generations now. That's not the reason that we're the Six Ranch. That's, pardon me, the number 6 is our brand.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up here, got to live a super cool rural, just wild life as a kid. I started guiding at age 14. I moved to Norway for a year when I was in high school. I wrestled while I was there. I was on the Norwegian national wrestling team, which is kind of crazy and bizarre. Then I went to college at Montana Western in Dillon, Montana. I got a degree in literature and writing, and then I joined the Marine Corps and commissioned as an officer, where I served for 5 years as a tank officer. I served in the States and in Afghanistan. I was medically retired from the Marines and moved home and started a fly fishing business that eventually grew into an outfitting business that operated in multiple states and countries. And, I've got lots of different guides that kind of come through for different seasons and species, do lots of wildlife management stuff. I write every month. So I'm often published in Guns America and sometimes in Outdoor Life. And I host the Six Ranch podcast. I still work here on the Six Ranch. I manage all of the wildlife and conservation and natural resources here. Yeah. And then, Six Ranch Outfitters does a lot of different guiding and things like that. And then I host the Six Ranch podcast, which is a lot of fun. Really enjoy doing that. Love learning from my guests and getting to spread their stories all over the world.
What I like about your podcast, man, is you've got, it's really good hunting content, but it's also a lot of like Americana historical living off the land. What do you say in the intro? Something about people that live with calloused hands.
That's the qualifier to be a guest is you've got to have calluses on your hands.
And I love that, man, because we grew up in somewhat similar conditions from a sense of ranching and being out there and being close to the land. And of course you're a lot smarter than I am. And we're a commissioned officer. I was a lowly enlisted guy, and I'm pretty proud of it. But
what was your job?
I was an 0311. I was an
Nice.
infantryman. Yep. So
yeah,
when you're 18 and you people tell you to plan for your future. And really the only thing important to me at 18 was being a rifleman in the U.S. Marines. And I thought that was going to be my future. But, after 5 years of doing that, I got out and I realized I don't really have any marketable skills in the civilian world. So,
yeah, it's a tricky thing that transition. And, I'm sure that there's active duty guys that are listening to this right now that are sort of thinking about what their future might look like.
Mm-hmm.
And don't worry about it too much, because those skills that don't transfer well on paper, like you can get really good at locating, closing with, and killing the enemy, and communicating your position and all the things that are required of combat Marines. And you might move into another job and think, man, I just don't have skills that transfer to this, but you really, really do.
Yeah, you'd
and
be surprised.
Veterans can provide something really special to just about any job, which is their leadership, their followership, their skill when things start to go wrong. Like they often start to perform at a much higher level when things are going wrong, which is almost the exact opposite of how civilians act. So yeah. I think that we can end up doing a little bit of harm by joking about some of that stuff, because I was at one time really scared about that too. And when I looked at the jobs that kind of come up in the list that I was now qualified for, having served as a tank platoon commander, it was like, hey, you can like drive an armored car for a bank, otherwise go pound sand,
Mm-hmm.
But man, I'd learned so much that helped me in so many different fields. So I think veterans really provide a lot, in that like the GI Bill is one of the best investments that our country has ever put back into itself.
Yeah, I agree. That's how I went to college, was on the GI Bill, and I wouldn't have been able to afford it outside without that, and I think that's a really good topic, in fact, because I think that, especially when you're young and you've got these ambitions of going into the military, everybody talks about how difficult it is to get through maybe boot camp, and maybe being for Marine Corps specific, being a brand new Marine in the fleet, that's a tough time in your life. This transition from being in a lot of cases a teenager to a young 20-something-year-old, and all of a sudden you're thrown into this different world, and there's the challenges with that. But what most people, and especially the recruiters, what they don't talk about is the transition from military life back to civilian life. And for our case, it was very extreme. I think we had gotten back from Iraq just before the 4th of July. It was still June, I remember. And I was processed, because we were stop lost at the time. I was processed out of the Marine Corps and found myself a civilian in less than a month. So I went from combat Iraq to all of a sudden I found myself a civilian driving a moving truck back across the country with all my stuff in it, driving home because they'd stuck me at a Camp Lejeune, which was a long way for a kid out west, and so that time and I got to tell you, we had my time in the Marines was almost 5 years in the infantry and the war on terror in Iraq and all these places we'd gone through and all the training and all the hardships and everything that we'd gone through. The most difficult part of the military for me was that first year after I got out. But I couldn't agree more with what you're saying from the standpoint of you'd be surprised how many skills you get from the military that actually do transfer to, I don't care if you're going to be a plumber, an attorney. I became an outside sales guy initially. And the initiative to achieve things and work with teams and be timely and, have some kind of structure and organization in my life took me a long way. What say you on that? Is that, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree.
How that transition works.
That transition is really difficult. And honestly, Jim, they did you a disservice by transitioning you out that quickly. And that can be really psychologically damaging to people.
Yeah, it was.
I think that the National Guard is especially susceptible to this because they get back on a Friday and they're back, stacking boards at Home Depot on Monday. So they really don't get that critical, like a couple months at least to stay with your unit. And, these units, they bring guys back and they start shotgunning people out and like separating them and getting them into different billets and transitioning. That shouldn't happen. Like if you're gone for 6 or 7 months, you need to stay together as a unit for a couple months back stateside. And I'm not even talking about being civilian yet, like just still active duty. Keep that unit together and let those guys air stuff out. And, if somebody's like, man, I cannot like stop yelling at my dog over the like dumbest thing. And, somebody else will be like, you know what? I'm doing the same thing. Isn't that weird? I love my dog.
Yeah.
And they can figure that stuff out with each other. And I think that that's the most healthy approach to it. I understand that that's not always the case, and then when you transition back into a civilian, it's really lonely. And if you move back to a rural area, chances are there's nobody else around with that shared experience. And, you can look left and right for an awful long ways and find nobody to talk to. And that's tough.
That loneliness is kind of a key point. And I love what you said about, and I don't mean to turn this whole conversation into, getting out of the military, but I think there's a lot of people that could benefit from hearing some of this stuff. What you had said, I think is critical let's put it this way. There's a difference between being a garrison Marine, which means you're stateside, you're on base, versus being a field Marine overseas somewhere like Afghanistan or Iraq. Right, that life is so those elements of life are so different, and it's almost a shock to the system when you transition from one to the other. So that time coming from somewhere like Iraq to allow those units to live stateside for a few months and it almost let that simmer kind of phase itself out. I remember a couple of us we get back and we'd gotten in a cab on Camp Lejeune and went out into Jacksonville, North Carolina, and they had like an Applebee's or something. We went out to Applebee's. It was a shock to our system. We didn't know how to act. We didn't know how to like socialize with people. We didn't know. It was just like all we wanted to do was get the hell out of there, and we did. And then to go from that to all of a sudden, now you're back home. After all that, and so suddenly, I remember losing my patience with some old high school buddies that invited me over, and they were complaining about the stress levels of working at Taco Bell. Those kind of scenarios. It was like they had no understanding as to where we had just been, and it was it added to the frustrations. And I think this is why a lot of guys get out and then go back in. I had a lot of friends that got out, and within 6 months they were back in the Marines. Anyways, I don't know where I'm going with this other than just kind of, rambling on it. But I think that's an important conversation that I think would help a lot of veterans if there was a little bit more organization on that side of it.
I'll tell you another quick story that will expand this to more people than just veterans and active duty dudes. As far as like showing value that you don't necessarily put on yourself that other people might value about you. I got called in to go to Cryptech years ago for an interview when they were first considering sponsoring me, and this is a big deal for me and continues to be. So I go in and I sit down and I meet with Butch and Josh and Bam and Justin, and we're kind of talking through, and I have this big game plan going in, right? Like I want to land this, and I'm like, okay, Cryptech, this is like this is a military flavored hunting camouflage company. I've got hunting. I'm good at that. I've got a good military record. Like these are my strengths. This is what I'm going in with. And I started to talk about that. And Butch, one of the owners, who's a cowboy from Idaho, comes from a ranching family. He was an attack helicopter pilot as well. He stopped me and was like, "Look, I've got better military dudes than you, and I've got better hunters than you." It's like, oh God, like that was my plan. What am I here for? And he said, "You grew up on a ranch and you have a degree in writing. And because of that, I know that you can think and I know that you can work. And because of those things, I'm interested in you." And neither of those had really held much value to me in my life besides that. And that was so heartwarming for me that like, I think about that all the time, and it makes me want to work really hard for them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. That's, I always like those kind of people, man. They're just super straightforward and right to the point. Man, I got people with better military and better hunting skills than you, and blah, 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 and just lets you have it. I love that kind of stuff. That's the salt of the earth kind of people. What years were you in the Marines?
I was in from 09 to 14.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Man, that makes me feel old.
You are old.
I am old. Look at that gray. You can actually see all the gray in my beard. Yeah, I'm about to turn 43, man.
Nice. So, good for you.
Yeah, I was in from 99 to 03, and so I was just curious if we'd cross trails, but yeah, I was long gone by the time you were in.
Yeah, those are high school years for me. So
yeah.
No, you were there during really interesting times, right? You went in during peacetime. You were active duty during 9/11. You were there for the invasion. Like those will go down as some really key moments in history. And that was the last time, 2000 was the last time that we knew life without terrorism.
It was, man. When I first went in, there was no thought of the possibility of a war. There was like really no thought of it. It was just like, I'm going to go serve my country for 4 years and see the world and, drink beer in foreign countries and chase foreign women. And, that's kind of the mentality. And then the USS Cole, there was a terrorist attack on the USS Cole when we were deployed within our group. And that happened. And then I want to say it was about roughly a year later is when 9/11 happened. Did you ever do CACs out in California?
Yep. And they've changed the name of that thing a million times. And I think they've changed it since I've done it, but they called it Mojave Viper, and they call it something else now. It's all the same deal though.
Yeah, it was CAC's combined arms exercise when I was in, and that's where I was at when 9/11 happened. And that's where things transitioned from, I don't know, things just got serious after then. And so, definitely. But anyway, tell me a little bit about, I'm curious about with the Six Ranch Outfitters, with what you guys do. You had made a post recently, and I get confused because you've got the James Nash page, or no, the Six Ranch Outfitters page, and then you've got the podcast page. What you guys do, like the school where you bring hunters over, and can you talk about that? Because I was really interested in that.
Yeah, thank you. Most outfitters have the goal of repeat clients. And when I started my fly fishing business, that's really what I wanted. I wanted clients that were going to come a couple times a year or at least every year and fish with me, because that cut down on my marketing costs and my advertising and things like that. It makes a lot of sense. And then you get to develop skill and relationships and all those things. Whenever I start to run into any type of a problem, I try to think about it in its opposite. And there was a legendary horseman here, a family of horsemen called the Dorrances, and they were kind of the original horse whisperers. And I'm reticent to even use that phrase because of the Robert Redford movie, but they kind of started the natural horsemanship movement.
Yeah.
And it was Tom and Bill Dorrance, and they're good horsemen and they're good cattlemen. And Tom Dorrance recommended to my dad one time that if you're ever working cattle and it's not going right, try doing the exact opposite thing of what you're doing right now as hard as you can. And sometimes that works really well. So if you're trying to get a cow to go through a gate and they're fighting you tooth and nail, try and push them into the wall of the far side of the corral and they will run through that gate like they're on fire. Okay. It works. And if you can understand things in their opposites, then you can understand the whole situation quite a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking about outfitting, and I was thinking about the future of hunting. And I thought, well, what if I try to guide somebody in a way that it's impossible for them to become a repeat client? What if I try to guide somebody in a way that they never need a guide again? Mm-hmm. Like, that'd be kind of cool. How would I do that? It's like, well, I'd probably have to break it down into a bunch of mini courses within a larger thing. And because of the way I like to learn and because of the way I was trained in the Marines, like, practical application is the way. So read step, do step, right?
Yep.
So I came up with concept for this hunting school and made a post about it. And I got a bunch of applications and I selected the best suited individual for that. And it was a gentleman named Shane Broskowski. And he was a Marine, transitioned to the Air Force, and is still Air National Guard. He was recently deployed. Super cool guy. He wanted to come out with his buddy. His buddy just wanted to be an observer. So I got them a landowner preference tag for a whitetail buck here on the Six Ranch. And I broke the course down like this. So I helped them with navigating the licensing system, which is tough to do. How to apply for a tag, how to understand regulations.
Yeah.
Help them with a gear list throughout the summer. They got here, we laid out their packs, we loaded everything back up, talked about what it would look like for a sure enough backcountry hunt, and then hiked them up over a cliff and back into the prairie on the backside of the ranch. And that was their introduction to their camping course. Now they set up their camp. We talk about how to do that, how to select campsites and why and things like that. And then we move straight into scouting. So from their camp, we can walk a short distance and we can start scouting for their actual hunt. The next day, we go out to the shooting range and spend hours and hours out there going through practical application of shooting. And then I had a couple guest speakers come in, and then we do more scouting, and we move into the actual hunting phase of things. Go out, we're able to shoot a buck first thing, which, is kind of the way it goes if you scout for long enough and spend enough time in the glass. Then we move into field dressing, and then the next day we moved into butchering, and we broke these animals down completely, went through all the meat cutting process. And grinding, cut and wrap, and they left with frozen meat in a box, and hopefully a baseline of knowledge for every step of a backcountry hunt in the West, so that when they want to do this again next year, they might call and have a couple questions, but in general, they're going to be able to go do this thing. They're going to know how to do it, the gear that they need to use, and I'm going to continue these hunting schools now because I had so much fun doing it. And I want to do it for different species and different states and kind of expand this out. It's been a hoot.
Man, I am really interested in something like this. I love I kind of was taking notes. So the concept is you help people get tags because I think a lot more difficult than a lot of people give it credit for. In fact, if I didn't have Eastman's has Tag Hub, and that really helps kind of break down for me what tags are even relevant and what you can get, what's realistic, all that stuff. And then you do you get them out there, you set them up with a camp and teach them how to camp. I can't tell you how many times I've been on a mountain and how many people don't know how to camp, and how many people put themselves in very dangerous situations because they can't pick out a camp spot. I once saved a couple. I think I've told this story on the podcast, but I heard if you're setting up in a wash, I'll just put it this way, and it's raining really bad, and that becomes a flash flood, and your tent's in the middle of where that flash flood is coming, you're dead. And that almost happened to me a couple of times. So, scouting, and then you get them on the range. That's super critical. Hunt, field dress, and then butcher. So that field dress and butcher, I'm curious for a dude like me, if I wanted to do that, can you walk me through how do you guys have like an application process, or is it just like you pay the fee? You kind of tell us a little bit about that part.
Man, right now I'm just having people write in on Six Ranch Outfitters Instagram, send me a message and tell me why you're a good fit for the class. And if you're interested in it, then I can answer any other questions you have and talk about how much the course costs. And if you're still in, then folks can just pay a deposit and they're on the list. So that's the phase that we're at for this year.
What, like in your mind, when you say write in, tell us why you think you'd be a good fit for a class, what would make somebody a good fit for the class? Is that asking too much detail, or?
No, I don't think so. In my mind, somebody's a good fit if they want to learn, and if they're coming into it with an open mind, and that their goal is to be able to turn this knowledge into a skill that they can use. So I don't necessarily want somebody that just wants to learn for the sake of it. I want them to actually be able to take this skill out and go do a thing with it. I've got a knife sitting here next to me that a buddy of mine made, and it's beautiful, right? It's this layered Damascus. The scales on the handle are from elk antler that I sent him. He made his own rivets. Like, it's a beautiful knife. Mm-hmm. And I'm constantly tempted to just leave this thing on my desk. But when he gave it to me, he said, make sure you go use this. And I find that instruction that comes from people who have that in their heart, right? They don't want somebody to just take this skill, take this thing and admire it and think about it. They want to turn it into use. And that's what I want for this as well. I want to see these guys next year go pound up the mountain someplace and come out with an animal on their backs because of what they learned out here this year.
I love the analogy too, by the way, but I've been talking about Hoffman boots for a very long time. You guys know that I'm a huge fan of this company. And it's not just the great products that they make. It's the story behind the company and the people that run it. This generational family of shoemakers right here in North Idaho makes some of the best hunting boots and pack boots and lineman boots and all your boot needs right in one place at hoffmanboots.com. For us hunters, I highly recommend the Explorer. And I don't care if you're running in the 6-inch or the 8-inch or the 10-inch. Personally, I love my 8-inch Explorers. They've got the Vibram sole. They are totally waterproof. There's no break-in period. Guys, you can't go wrong with Hoffman boots because you get all that without breaking the bank. So check them out at hoffmanboots.com and use promo code all caps lock Huntsman10 at checkout for 10% off, and find out why I have been wearing my Hoffman boots for years and years. Don't be one of those people that have it in their mind that Savage Arms is the same firearms that your grandpa was running around with 40 years ago. It's not. Big game hunting rifles that you can count on. I love my Savage firearms. I have got the Savage 110 Hunter, And my daughter is pretty happy with this 110 Apex Hunter XP. The AccuTrigger is a really interesting little piece to this firearm, and it's a new piece of technology that if you've never tried one, you should, because it'll make you more accurate. It's a much easier, higher quality firearm than anything else I've got out there. And I've got a lot of firearms, guys. And so if you're in the market for a new hunting rifle, make sure you visit savagearms.com, because I promise you're going to find something that is accurate, easy to handle, easy to use, long range, functional, just a high quality weapon that you could take to the field and have a lot of confidence that when the time comes, you've got that Savage backing you up and you're going to be notching a tag. Check it out, savagearms.com. Let them know the Western Huntsman sent you. Thanks, guys. I look at that and I read the notes and I consider that, everybody knows that listens to my show. They don't listen to my show to get hunting advice from me, right? I am the world's most average hunter. And so, and I'm okay with that. But I feel like when, I'll give you an example. You said the scouting part. I'm really good at scouting in North Idaho. I'd love to get some people to help me learn how to scout different types of areas for different types of species, and having somebody, especially a guide, that has all that incredible experience. I'd love to get that kind of knowledge, and the, butchering. I learned how to butcher animals by watching a few YouTube channels, and I'm not great at it. My wife and I, we team up and we do all our own animals, but, to have somebody with that kind of knowledge and experience, especially, you're with your ranching out or background, I guarantee you that helps. But I mean, just follow Six Ranch Outfitters, and you guys listening will see what I mean. I'd love to walk through something like that with you. And so, I'm serious. I would probably apply for that. I consider myself a pretty decent shot, but I'd love to learn what other methods, other skill sets that somebody like you or whoever else that you have there could see where some of my blind spots are, some of my weak points, because I definitely have them. So that is way cool. So the way to look more into that is to jump on the Six Ranch Outfitters Instagram and just send the message.
Yeah, maybe we need to do something and collaborate with Eastman's next year, and we'll go do something in Wyoming. And there's enough guys that are so knowledgeable and helpful and good teachers within that Eastman's crew. We could probably take on a bigger cadre of students and go out and maybe do something with doe antelope or something like that. And bring like a Weatherby or a Nosler or somebody like that on board to help out. I think that there's a lot of need for this. And if you don't grow up hunting, it can be really hard to navigate through all of these barriers to entry. Yeah. And it does start with understanding licensing and regulation. And man, that's difficult in every single state. It's just hard to do. So, I fear for the future of hunting. And a lot of it is because if we don't have this pass through generations, then it is hard to get back into it. So I want to develop these pathways for people to be able to get into hunting at any phase of their life. And as long as they have the will to do it, then I can help them get through the physicality of it.
So James, when you say you have fear for the future of hunting, what is that fear? What's driving that fear? What do you see as some of the biggest risks for the future of hunting?
So a lot of people who are influential in hunting today are lying to their audiences, and that always ends in tragedy, right? That always ends in tragedy, because the people that they're influencing will have an expectation that's not based in reality. And that's within our own house that we have that problem. Outside of our house, we have a lot of people who are opposed to hunting and are opposed to the tools that we use to go hunting. So, there's restrictions on Instagram for showing a hunting knife. You can show a culinary knife. So if you're cutting up that meat that you bought in the store, that's fine. But if it's meat that's coming off of an animal that isn't to the store yet, then that's not okay. Ammunition, guns, like all that stuff is no longer okay for it to even be visible on social media.
Yeah.
If we continue down the cycle, then people will lose that ability to even observe what hunting is. We have a lot of opponents. We also have a growing predator problem throughout the West, and honestly throughout every part of the country, whether that predator is coyotes that are exploiting a new area, or feral pigs that are exploiting a new area, or gosh, even something like snow geese, where you have a rapidly expanding population that can really damage crops. Like, they're not preying on animals, but they are preying on crops and people's ability to be profitable on their own land. There's lots of this coming up, and the solution oftentimes is to add more predators. So right now, Oregon and Colorado have made a deal where Oregon is going to try and trap 10 wolves to send to Colorado. And Colorado already has wolves, but they're about to have more. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, Oregon wolves are freaking no joke. Like, they are lethal on elk. They're lethal on moose. They dig bears out of their dens. They kill cattle like crazy. And it just breaks my heart. It feels like the same as if Colorado were to buy, COVID-19 from China and import it. Like, this is going to hurt people.
That's how I see it too.
Do you get what you're doing? Like, this is going to cause problems, and you're paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm frankly embarrassed that Oregon would even sign up to say, yeah. I mean, if the only benefit for us is that we'll have 10 fewer wolves, but their population increases at a rate of 33% per year, so like that's not a meaningful amount.
What is the James? What is the wolf population in Oregon? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, it's just over 170. However, wolves are the only animal in Oregon that when they count them, they count every single individual and make sure that they haven't counted it twice. So it is a bare minimum. All of our other animals, they count based off of models using terrain and habitat and population estimates like that.
Yeah.
But wolves, they count every single individual. And the bare minimum number of wolves that we know are in Oregon is over 170. When they get to the west side of the state, where there's triple canopy of timber, those methods for counting individuals from the air no longer work.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why they don't even count elk in North Idaho, is because of the canopied forest. It's impossible.
Exactly. So they're still trying to use that same methodology, even though they have, a huge portion of the state that wolves are in where they cannot count them from the air. So they're trying to figure stuff out with like game cameras, but how do you know that, that's not the same individual more than once? It's tricky, but
it's super tricky. We deal with that in the state of, like in Idaho, for example, they were doing this thing where I can't remember what they called it, the study of everything, or the conservation effort of everything, or something like that. But that's what they did. They incorporated multiple game cameras and aerial monitoring and all these different methods, and they still kind of in background discussions that I've had, they still think that the number that they are putting out in terms of wolf estimates are pretty low. And they're sitting at just north of 1,300, which, mind you, they were upwards of around 1,545 in the state of Idaho. If you look at 1,545, the objective was 350 to 500. So that is 3 times the amount for the entirety of the Rocky Mountain State region, the tri-state region of Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana. Idaho alone has 3 times the objective amount. And so they're obviously spilling into Washington. They're obviously spilling into Oregon. They're obviously spilling into California. Not sure if they've made their way down to Utah yet from the Idaho side, but they certainly will from Colorado once they're introduced into Colorado. It's the biggest. It's perhaps one of the most devastating wildlife management decisions I've ever seen made, where they did this ballot box initiative to vote by the populace, these folks in Denver, whether or not they should release wolves into Colorado. It's going to be a nightmare. These elk in Colorado don't even know what to do with wolves, and that's where the problem is. And they first, what we experienced here in Idaho was the moose were the first ones to have a big negative impact. I've seen them ripped apart on dirt roads in the backcountry not far from home, and then the second is the elk. And the initial studies, when they were initially released back in 1995, were saying that mule deer were going to be their number one prey species. And that's just not the case. The mule deer have definitely suffered, but it is moose and then elk and then mule deer. They don't seem to spend too much time chasing whitetail, probably because whitetail are a little tricky for them. But anyway, that's our experience here. It's going to be a nightmare for Colorado, especially those of our listeners and everybody down there that loves to pursue elk. It's going to be a nightmare, a conservation nightmare as well.
Well, and there will be a tax burden for everyone in the state, because they're going to have to come up with money to offset the losses both to wildlife and domestic livestock.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just it's an unfortunate thing where we have people who fall in love with like the idea of a predator, the idea of a wolf. And, even though the people that vote in favor of that will never interact with them, they'll never see them, they'll never feel the impacts of that animal being in the ecosystem and causing problems, other than that they're going to probably have to pay some more money in taxes. And then the people who vote against it are the ones who are going to suffer the most. And it's very unfortunate, and we've got to break out of this cycle. And, a lot of our wildlife biologists are extremely hardworking individuals that got into it because they're passionate about wildlife and they want to help. But the field biologists aren't the ones who get to make decisions. The ones who are making decisions are oftentimes very far removed from the field, and they're just working on spreadsheets, and then they're going to be controlled by a wildlife commission that is appointed by a governor who was voted on by the, populace. So whether it's an urban population that's voting on wildlife issues, or an urban population is voting for a governor who's then going to appoint people in their image to make these decisions on a wildlife commission, we've just got a lot of issues here. And I want to see more local control. These regional wildlife biologists need to be able to have more control over the wildlife that they love and care about and are connected to.
That's what I was kind of going to get to in terms of asking you. What do you see as valid, tangible solutions to, because we're dealing with a lot of things, and you kind of listed them off. We've got commissioners that are generally non-hunters in states such as Washington, obviously, Oregon, California, and some other states in the West. New Mexico for sure. We've got, and that's like you said, a governor's appointment. We've got this anti-gun movement where they are that is a good tool. That is a good avenue for the anti-hunter to pursue, because if they take away some of these hunting opportunities for sportsmen and how do you say that? Sportsmen, sportswomen? I never know what to. I usually just flat out avoid that so I don't get in trouble. But
I don't know, man.
I don't care. Whatever. If somebody's mad about it, get over it. It's what it is. So
wear a helmet.
Wear a helmet. I love it. And you've got the gun issue. You've got these anti-hunting. I call them hostile vegans that have made it their life's mission to try to push everybody into this lifestyle of veganism. I mean, you guys in Oregon have some crazy ones over there, man. What is that? IP13? I can't remember what that initiative was, but we've talked about it a bunch on my show.
Yeah.
And then you've got this other issue that is just as close as home, but it's a totally different approach as to how we solve it, which is habitat management, land management, public access, those kind of things that tie into, creating neighborhoods in mule deer winter habitats and a lot of these mule deer and other species getting wiped out on freeways, things like that. What do you see as if we could all, and this will never happen, but let's say we can all, as hunters and outdoorsmen, get on the same exact page for one goal in mind. What do you think that we should all focus on?
Never hunting with llamas again.
Never
That's
hunting
number
with
one.
llamas again?
Yeah. We need to end this madness of bringing llamas with us on hunting trips.
Man, I've thought about it though. They'd be pretty handy sometimes.
No. Are you out of your? They can carry like 30 pounds, and that's their own food. Like that's what is emotional support animal?
I agree.
What happened to your masculinity? My God, you want to bring a llama with you?
I've done horses, and I don't have horses anymore because they cost me a fortune and they give me attitude. I don't really like ATVs that much, so that's out of the question. The only other thing, I see these guys running around with a string of llamas in the backcountry. I'm like, what? They just follow them around like dogs. How do they even get them like that?
Until they just lay down in the trail and refuse to get up.
Since you asked me where my masculinity is with the llama situation, I'm never even going to consider it again, man. I didn't even know that was a thing.
No, I think to answer your question a little bit more seriously, where we all need to get on the same page is understanding that there's not one page. The issues that I'm dealing with in Northeast Oregon are radically different from the issues that everyone is dealing with in their own areas. So when I talk about local control and local decision making, that's really what I'm driving towards. So I think that the page we need to get on is understanding that I don't know anything about what people are dealing with in northern Iowa right now. I don't.
Sure.
I'm happy to learn, and I'm happy to support one side or another after I feel like I have sufficient knowledge. But at this stage, I don't know. But I do know that they need to actually go out and work on those issues and not just discuss them, not just talk about them. Like they've got to send the emails, they've got to make the phone calls, they've got to show up to the meetings. They need to go out there with a shovel and dig a hole and plant a tree in it or whatever is required. Like they have to physically act on these things.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the page I would like to see people get on, is to understand that you need to focus on the problems in your area and you need to go out and actually do something about them.
I think that it could solve a lot of problems if we had more localized control over everything, even like something such as the Forest Service, the United States Forest Service. Why is that such a, well, I know why. There's no reason to ask why the federal government has grown out of control to an aspect where they think they can control everything within 48 states out of the one city and, on the East Coast. Anyway, different topic, different podcast. But even if it were to remain somewhat as is, the local control of a local Forest Service, the way that they can manage habitat, and made that a priority, because there's like this disconnect between the fact that states manage the wildlife versus the feds manage the land. There's like no cohesion there. What they're managing land for sometimes is not very beneficial to what the wildlife needs. Anyways, that again, I know we're kind of running out of time here, but I want to talk a little bit about, unless you had something to add there.
No, I think that you're spot on. I will say that, within the Forest Service, there are individuals and even ranking members who want to go out and do that work, but they're hamstrung by big Forest Service, right?
Yeah.
So you
absolutely
have, forest rangers and forest timber managers who want to be able to go out and log more trees and plant more trees, and they want to be able to, work inside riparian areas, but they have, rules that are coming down from, big like Washington, D.C. Forest Service that prevent them from being able to do that work. So there's levels of bureaucracy within that mega bureaucracy that that are really problematic. And yeah, local control would be great. And you know what? There's going to be things that go wrong with it. If you allow that to happen, you're going to have people that make the wrong decision, and it's going to be costly. But I think that those fears keep us from being able to realize the larger benefit that we would get from people who understand their problems best and understand the solutions to those problems better than anyone else.
I think it speaks to anything when we're dealing with any national issue. For example, the idea of a Department of Education making the same exact mandates for, I guess another way to put it, school districts in central Montana in a rural town require and necessitate different things than, say, in Pittsburgh or Miami. And that they operated a lot more proficiently with a much better outcome when they were more of a local controlled entity versus what they've become today. Again, that's another topic. You said who did you say you write the gun articles for?
Guns America on 365.
Oh, Guns America. Okay.
Yeah. So I've been running a series for the last 6 months now called Never Miss Again, and I'm breaking down different ways to prevent missing. That's something that's really important to me as a hunter, as a conservationist, as a Marine, for sure. Like, missing is a massive problem, and if it doesn't feel like the biggest failure you've ever personally taken part in, then chances are you're not living correctly. But we need to stop missing so much. We need to stop wounding so many animals. And it's a massive, massive problem. So that's what I've been working on for the past half of a year is breaking down ways so that people stop freaking missing.
Really? So I agree with that. I had I had a couple of opportunities this September to send an arrow into a bull, and I hesitated because last year I shot a bull, and it kind of liver shot him a little far back. Got dark, and I just kind of backed out, and I figured I'd find him in the next day or whatever. And when I went back up to where I'd shot him, my truck caught on fire and burned to the ground.
Oh,
and
no.
So I wasn't able to get back up there for like a week, and then by then the crows had led somebody else to the animal, and they'd taken the antlers, and it was a disaster. But because of that, I was super hesitant to let some arrows fly this last September. I wanted a perfect clean shot, and it speaks to what you're talking about, where that when you do miss, man, it hurts. My daughter missed a bear this spring, shot right over his back. And I don't know how much I want her to know that it was actually the scope. I don't know if it got knocked or what, but we took it home and I shot it, and I'm like, oh, no wonder she missed. But she learned the pain of missing and learned the longevity of that pain, how after the shot. And so I think that's a critical thing. Do you write anything in regards to like gun control legislation, those kind of more political things, or is it more advocacy?
No, I haven't. I'm not opposed to doing that, but I just haven't had that call. The closest thing I've come to that is I worked on some anti-suicide initiatives earlier this year, and of course, guns are the most popular method of suicide because they're the most effective method of suicide. So guns are part of that talk. I did, since you brought it up, one of the installments that I wrote in the series was on ways to mount a scope so that it doesn't come loose.
Oh yeah.
So that's part of my series.
So I didn't mount her scope, man. The store right. I bought it from mounted it. It was one of those youth rifles that came as a package.
Gotcha.
And so it was all jacked up. I don't know what happened. I don't know if she did it or if I may have done it too.
No, it's all right. It's a common enough thing, and that's absolutely. That's why I chose that as one of the topics to talk about. I had a buddy whiff on a grizzly bear in Alaska this year at the end of a sheep hunt because his scope had come loose. It's like, dude, like there's ways to prevent this.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look that article up because I'm curious. I don't know how to balance it. I'm like a 50-50. I'm a 50% bow hunter, 50% rifle hunter, and I just can't. You have these purists on both sides.
Mm.
I just can't do it. I enjoy both of them too much. So, I going and the last thing I was hoping to cover with you, it was a post you had made not long ago. And I think it ties into what you had just mentioned earlier, maybe with the what you're seeing as a potential threat to the future of hunting. And that's a lot of these influencers that are kind of faking this and that, and maybe giving the wrong impression as to what hunting is and what maybe your expectations as a hunter should be. I'm not sure quite where we just kind of touched on it. But you made a post, you'd gotten an elk, and you talked in the post about sitting beside the elk instead of behind it. Can you expand on that? I was really intrigued with that post, and there's a reason why I was, but I kind of want to hear you expand on what you mean by sitting beside the elk as a grip and grin versus like getting behind it.
Well, yeah, just let it be what it is. If you stand back behind that animal and you use a wide angle lens, it's going to end up making that animal look bigger than what it actually is. And Eastman's actually put out a really tremendous article about this several years ago about how they wanted to see animals posed if you wanted to get on the cover of Eastman's magazine, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of hunters sort of grew up thinking of that as a goal. Like they wanted to be on the cover of Eastman's, for hunters. Like that's number one. That's Sports Illustrated, and they talked about a lot of really positive things, like, don't get camouflage behind the antlers. Think about your lighting, think about how the animal's posed and cleaned up, and all these things to make this really classic photo that's going to end up, potentially on their magazine cover. And I think that a lot of that's great, but that leads people into this world of dishonesty where they're using angles and lenses and body positioning to make something seem much larger than it actually is. And if you do that, then you've manipulated everything about the experience. Like, just let it be what it is. Like, be honest in your photography and preserve that experience the way it actually happened. Be more of a documentarian than a cinematographer, I guess is sort of what I'm saying there.
Because not everything is going on the cover of Eastman's magazine, right? I mean, it's not the point. I think
yeah. And it's also just about, being genuine and being authentic. A lot of people were like scratching their heads about why Oliver Anthony's music blew up so much. But that was the most authentic music video that any of us had seen in years. There's a dude standing in a holler next to a tree stand with his dogs on the ground.
Yeah.
And he was singing about something that he felt in his heart. And that struck a chord with everyone in the country in one way or another. And it was because it was authentic. That's something that we should strive for. I caught a huge fish one time, and I know we're running short on time, but I caught this huge amberjack in North Carolina one time. And in North Carolina, if you catch a trophy class fish, then the captain of the boat can submit to the governor, and the governor will send you a citation, which is a good citation. It will have an image of that species. It'll be signed by the governor. This is like a certificate acknowledging, from the governor of North Carolina that you've caught a trophy class fish. It's a really cool thing. So this was an amberjack, a great big amberjack. We brought it back. We weighed it on the scale, did everything that we needed to do to submit for this citation. And they wanted to take a picture of it with me. And I've, grown up fishing for trout, right? And, there's a way that you hold up a trout for a photo, and your arms are pretty long in the photo. And I tried to hold up this great big amberjack like that. And I was like grimacing, and like I couldn't do it because it was too big. And this old sea captain came up and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, son, you don't have to hold them like that if they're actually big. And that struck a chord with me.
That.
And I've thought about that as a metaphor for so many things in my life.
Yeah.
Like, just let it be what it is. Don't try and trick people into thinking that it's something else. Like, just be honest and be happy.
Yeah. Man, I love that. That's a great story too, because it ties in. And I'm like, back in the day when I first learned to fly fish, this is years ago, I was an expert at taking an 8-inch cutthroat trout and making that sucker look like a 30-pound trout or something. But yeah, I agree, and that's why that post caught my eye, is because I do. It's like a pet peeve of mine when somebody gets behind the elk and they're way back, or a buck, or I don't care what it is, and you could tell there's some trickery going on. And it's just not. The reason why it's a pet peeve of mine is I don't care what people want to do and how they want to present the animal that they killed. What I care about is it creates this environment where we become, everything that we do as hunters is now this big social media competition. And, I know a lot of people that don't even post animals that they kill because it's not a trophy animal. I am like my buddy Jeff Bynum taught me this term. I am like a raghorn specialist, man. I'll shoot a 3-point buck. I'll shoot, it depending on the area I'm in. I'm not a picky hunter. Obviously I'm going for the biggest I can get, but I think it takes away when we have to feel like we're competing against so-and-so influencer or so-and-so hunter, or, other hunters that pay $30,000 to go hunt on these ranches, or it doesn't, and I'm not judging any of that one way or the other, but it does. Social media has created this competition where we feel like we are less than. In fact, I've seen people give hunters a hard time over what they killed, and they don't know if that's their first animal. They don't know how important that animal is to them personally, and it's not their decision. And that's why I think it chaps my ass when I see that kind of stuff, because it does, it like dilutes the expectation of what should be reality, especially for new hunters. And I think it prevents people from committing to becoming a good ethical hunter. And I think it creates a lack of ethics in a lot of situations, because people are pursuing what they would consider Instagram gold versus what they would consider a successful hunt. Make sense?
Yeah, don't let somebody else define success for you.
Yeah, exactly. I know we're down to it, man. I feel like we just scratched the surface. We've got way more to talk about at some point. We're going to have to do this after season or something.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation, man. Thanks for taking the time to jump on the show here, and it's always hard this time of year getting podcasts out, man, and trying to get off the mountain and record these. So
I understand.
Where can people find you before we cut it off?
I'm easy enough to find, but I think what I'd rather say is, look, if you're still hanging in here at this point in the show, thank you very much for listening. Support this show. Like, if you enjoyed this, think of one person in your life that you think might enjoy it as well, and send it to them, because you just got this show for free. It's good entertainment. Hopefully there's some good information in there. Just do right by Mr. Jim here, and show him some love, and just share this with a buddy.
Hey, appreciate that. Where do I send the check for that kind of marketing?
Oh, you can just pay for my Eastman's Tag Hub thing for next year.
There you go, man. I'll bet you we can work something out on that one. So, no, that's great, man. Stick on the line. I appreciate you joining me. It was an honor, pleasure getting to know you. It was as good as I was hoping it would be, and kind of thought it would be. So good to put a face to a name and really meet you in person.
Thank you, Jim.
You made it. That's the end of the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please make sure you're following us on Instagram @TheWesternHuntsman, and write us a good review at Apple Podcasts. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Stay Western, and I'll see you on